call the November 20th, 2024 meeting of the Public Works Commission to order. First item is the agenda itself.
Motion to approve?
Yeah, looking for.
I will second the motion.
Second.
Oh, did we already beat it?
Yeah, I'm good. And with a slight adjustment that we're looking to put agenda item 5 before public forum this evening, just to allow Megan to go to another meeting on the same subject. That's a friendly amendment?
I accept the friendly amendment.
Likewise.
Excellent.
Otherwise, everybody-
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye for myself, no nays. We will move forward to the agenda item 5, now 3.
2.5.
2.5, yeah.
So we met with you, was it October or September? I can't remember now. Might have been September.
Yeah.
And so we just wanted to come back to you to update some of the data, share where we're at with rate impacts. Yeah, basically just to keep you updated as we move along in this process. So some of the big things that changed from the last time that we talked, I think I had given you draft ranges. Those numbers are settling down. We're still working to make sure they are the absolute right numbers and there's nothing else we can slide off. One of the things that we did do between meeting with the council Tuesday of last week and the following day was making the decision to exclude the Winooski River siphon from the bond proposal and put our eggs in the FEMA basket. There's nothing we're getting from FEMA right now that says it's not going to be funded, and we think there's a different funding source, we should put it there, and we'll deal with it if for some reason that assumption changes. So now we are looking at, they're still big numbers, but they're smaller, big numbers. 190 million on wastewater and 14 on the stormwater side, so 204 for the clean water, or what we're calling the lake bond, and then 21 million on the drinking water side. And that stems from not just the siphon, removal of the siphon, but also tidying up these numbers for the actual wastewater treatment plant, which is now coming in at 178. This was just our communication to others that while this project is still planning on moving forward, we did remove it from the bond vote proposal based on the council feedback. And we also tidied up, or have been tightening the numbers on the drinking water reservoir project. I can't remember the previous number I had given you, but even with a healthy contingency, which we are carrying because federal money that we hope to get a loan for this project will have the sort of new Buy American requirements, what they're called BABA, which are supposed to be more intense than the American iron steel ones. And so we don't know exactly what that's going to do to our project, and so there is a healthy contingency in here, which, you know, could change if we figure out more about what is and what isn't eligible for waivers. We started to calculate the rate impact. I think the original rate impact that I shared with the council was 113% increase over 5 years, so from FY25 rates, which are around $60, up to FY30 rates, we are looking at some fairly healthy, substantial per increase rate increases of 17, 18, 20%. It then drops down a little bit and then kind of drops down to what I consider a more typical level. And one of the things that's interesting to see is things really start to have the potential to level out as you get up to FY35, which is when the refinance debt from 2014 that happened because there was a balloon payment, and at that point the administration did not save for the balloon payment, and so a $14 million bill became due and got refinanced. It is distressing financially to us who are now in charge because we will be ripping out equipment that we are still paying for, which is not a thing you ever want to do on your house or your assets, but that is the reality of the situation. But things do start to get a little rosier as we start getting out to that time period. These are sort of some contextual slides. One of the things we started looking at is just where we are as far as rates right now compared to other communities. And so we compared ourselves to a number of Vermont communities as well as a number of New England communities, including some such as Portsmouth and Portland, who are combined sewer communities. And sort of traditionally, you do see the communities that have combined sewer issues as having higher overall costs because of that additional burden of managing a way that we used to do things and trying to make it right now. So when you take a look at that data, you see that currently
not the future, but currently, our typical residential bill, right? If somebody uses more than 400 cubic feet, it's going to be higher. If they use less than 400 cubic feet, it's lower. But it is less than the median annual bill for similar Vermont communities, and then even for the surveyed New England communities. So again, I'm looking for little nuggets of like, you know, context. We're doing okay, and this is what our reality is. Some other things we've been pursuing, we still have a lot of things on the list to try to get the size of this impact to ratepayers down. The model does currently assume that we are financing a portion of our debt with the Vermont State Revolving Fund loan, which has great rates, 2%. Sometimes comes with loan forgiveness, though you're never guaranteed. And I've already had communications with the Secretary of the Agency of Natural Resources to figure out if we can get more of that funding, if there's a way of even buying down the interest rate further, if they could come up with some way of helping us with 1%, that makes substantial difference, because the remainder right now in the model of the debt is financed through public bonds, which have much higher interest rates. But until I know that the SRF can really fund more of our project, I kind of have to make sure the portfolio and the expectations are set reasonably. There's also a program called WIFIA, which is sort of a direct to the EPA SRF program. It hasn't been done in Vermont before. That doesn't change things for us because we often do things that haven't been done in Vermont before. Tons of paperwork, but there could be lower rates and more flexible terms. We're looking at all available opportunities for grant funding. We are on the congressionally delegated spending list for the reservoir for $1 million. I think as of tomorrow, we're submitting for a community change grant, which would fund some of the infrastructure needs around combined sewer overflow. I don't know what our chances are of getting that, but we're trying everywhere. I had a good conversation with our engineers who said that they had already actually talked to the Northern Borders Commission, and because of the growth piece that I can talk a little bit more about, they're very interested, growth and jobs creation. And then the secretary, you know, was very interested in what our eligibility was for the pollution control grants, and I need to calculate that and see if there's a chance of having more firm conversation. Pollution control grants are really interesting in that you are told that you're eligible for a certain amount, but then the money often doesn't come for like 4, 5, 6 years later. You magically get a call and they give you money, and that's great because it often restores your bonding capacity, but it makes it really hard for me to model that and say we're definitely going to get that. We are also looking at the potential of rate restructuring. In the 2021 Affordability Program change, we tiered the water usage into residential Tier 1 and Tier 2, so people using the typical amount of water, 400 cubic feet or less, actually get a very good rate for that water. We did not do that on the sewer side. We could. However, that would mean other rate classes would end up potentially having to pay more, and so I want to run some numbers and kind of see what the tolerance is, and if we could do it in a way that kind of helps out on the residential side but doesn't kill the rest of the folks. That's one of the things we're going to be exploring, potentially with the TUC, if they're the committee that we explore affordability measures with. And then my current model doesn't have the new users, right? We talked about the fact that we need to build a bigger plant because we have this additional connection. It becomes very hard, and you don't want to rely on people connecting in a given year, because if they don't connect, then you have a shortfall. But I am trying to come up with a way to maybe take into account certain projects that are like already under construction, and even if they tell me they're going to be ready with the certificate of occupancy in 2026, maybe I plug them in for 2028 to give them a little buffer and make sure we don't get ourselves backed into a corner. But those are all things that can maybe help a little bit, to the extent that I hope that 107 is sort of like a worst case scenario, and we're going to get better from there. One of the other things we did was actually have the engineer, if you recall these goals, resiliency, environmental capacity, work safety, and odors, and we actually broke out the costs that are involved into those buckets so that we can use these as points of conversation with our funding agencies and grant organizations. In particular, within the $67 million of water quality improvements, about $30 million is for tertiary, which is the phosphorus requirement that we as a community with large wastewater plants have to bear. Communities across Vermont that have medium or small wastewater plants didn't have to meet this new requirement. They had to go through an optimization process, but they weren't having to look at doing capital investments. And so we think there's a conversation there about, hey, we're making it right. I think because we are, even though wastewater is a small proportion of the load, we are a big proportion of the wastewater. Vermont sort of has vested investment in us doing this project. And then the other piece, the 41 million for capacity expansion, I think that can be a point of conversation with folks who are interested in growth, be it the Northern Borders Commission or even the state, the governor and the administration, if they really want to have growth happen in the city. I think it got passed on the council on the 18th, but I believe that one of the legislative priorities of the administration of the top 5 was also to advocate for additional infrastructure funding at the state level and in the legislature. I need to circle back to confirm that, but that's what I understood from the mayor's office. So that's another plus. A couple of other details. I know we mentioned this as part of our plan with the East to Main plant consolidation, but as people have been asking, what can we phase, what can we not do? I want to make sure that people understand that the things that we have selected have been selected very carefully. We are continuing to go through the list and make sure there's not some scope item that we can hold off until a future date. But I wanted to make sure that people understood why we were pursuing this plant consolidation. And basically, when we run the numbers, like East Plant also is in dire condition. And while it's a small plant, having permit violations at East Plant versus Main Plant, there's still permit violations. And if we look at the cost of rebuilding East Plant, we would be spending $28 to $32 million, and we'd have to then keeping it up as a plant forever. When we look at the cost of the current consolidation option, which is turning the plant into a pump station and then building this new pipe system, those are some of the routes that we're considering. It's about $31 million. And when we look at life cycle costs, it saves ratepayers about $30 million over the next 50 years. So because of all of that, we think it is still the right thing to do. This is just another version of all of the projects that are being considered, but I've highlighted the things that we're working on, but that we're not pursuing as part of the bond in orange, just so folks can see that there are things that are either for a later date, particularly stage 3, some of the smaller scale combined sewer reduction stuff, as much as if we get grants, we might do that, but we're really gonna be focusing on the big CSO tank, really tackling that, and so on and so forth. Another interesting point of context was taking the amount that we're investing in our wastewater plant, and I actually combined the 178 with the about 21.3 million that we've already spent or will have already spent in the plant. And it's a big number compared to other communities, but we have a lot of capacity. So when you normalize it by our gallons per day, the cost per million gallons is very much in the realm of what other communities are spending. So I know there's the shock of the big number, but everything, well, maybe it's because I was from Texas, everything's bigger in Burlington, I guess, versus Texas, so. Another thing that I did was, because somebody was like, well, how do we get here? Why do we have to have such a big rate increase? And I've kind of been keeping this graph up to date for a while, but, and it's interesting when you go back even further, because some of these no rate increase years were even before this. But I did an exercise in which there was a survey by the American Waterworks Association that looked at the time period from 1998 to 2023, and on average, water utilities raised their rates about 5% each year. And if I applied that 5% rate, that's the yellow line, and you would see that by 2025, we would actually be up at like $85 a month already, had we kind of gotten the money along as we should have, versus the $60, and it would have reduced the magnitude of the rate increase that we're looking at right now about by half. So it also would have given us money all of those years to potentially take care of the stuff, and maybe we wouldn't even have as big of a investment that we needed to make. So it's not to blame anybody, it's just the context of where we are, and it is not, I think specifically in Vermont, it's not uncommon to see this where people try to not have any rate increases or very low rate increases, but the consequence is then you have these years of like crazy wacko rate increases that nobody can anticipate, and your income is certainly not keeping up with it. And so really trying to think about, as a community, like regular investments, just like we all try to make regular investments in other assets that we manage. I think that's it for now. well, I can give you this presentation. There's lots of other turns of the dial that we're gonna be considering with our Water Resources Assistance Program. And one of the things I think we mentioned that we're really interested in is figuring out how to offer a credit to renters. So renters don't usually pay their water bill because usually like a multifamily dwelling has a single meter. And so the landlord pays the meter, pays the water bill, and then obviously passes on some portion of the cost in the rents. BED, they often meter by apartment and are able to give a direct bill to each of those renters. And there is a Seattle Public Utilities, they've actually collaborated, the electric department and the water department. And for people who qualify that are like so BED, they have a ratepayer assistance program where people qualify to get a discount on the BED bill. If we could know who those people are and come up with an appropriate amount, we could give BED money to then further discount that person's electric bill, thereby decreasing their overall utility cost. And it enables us to get money directly in the pockets of the ratepayers or the rent payers, and hopefully mitigate the likely increases they are gonna see in their rent as the result of our rate increases. Does that make sense? Did I explain that? There's only one other model in DEC, but that involves getting the landlord to enroll, and then you pay, the landlord gets the money and they're supposed to give it to the renters, and that doesn't seem like a thing that I wanna manage. I think that's it. We still have more, for the public who are maybe watching, we have more wastewater treatment plant tour dates. They're a lot of fun. Everybody's really interested. We're a whole bunch of different times and dates. It's a little hard with the darkness, but it's a great way to see up close and personal what it is that our team does and the condition of the infrastructure. And if anybody wants to get a group of 5 people or more, or even less, Matt Dow specifically said he would give tours to the raccoons and squirrels of Burlington if it meant that it helped, inform people about what our needs are.
Great, thank you, Megan. We've got about 5 minutes before Megan has to leave. I can continue to field questions and write them down, but let's turn to you all and hear your questions.
Does anyone have any quick comments for Megan that would like to?
Quick.
Yeah.
Any anticipated changes with the new administration and any of the potential EPA funds? Like, is this, because this stuff isn't committed yet?
Yeah, I mean, I think the SRF, I don't know that program could easily be gutted, but I suppose anything is possible. I think also the new administration said they wanted clean water and clean air, so.
Gotta get it somehow.
Yeah, and infrastructure jobs, I would hope there's enough of a nexus that it's not going to be the easiest thing to flick off the plate.
Mhm.
But yes, always a possibility, and then we would be looking at potentially increased costs if the SRF funding went away.
I guess, and then kind of related to that, and BABA, the Build America, Buy America, what changes are folks anticipating if there are any new rules around Build America, Buy America with the potential trade war with China?
Yeah, I have not gotten
Okay.
into all of that, and there's nothing, I mean, unfortunately, there's even very little published on BABA projects and the impact of BABA, because that money I think federal money just became BABA required this fiscal year, and so there haven't been a lot of projects that have been built yet. So it's really this huge unknown. It's also unknown about how difficult it may be to get waivers, because there usually are waivers that say if a requirement like that increases the cost of your project by, I think it's 25% or more, then you can get a waiver. And so, but that still means that your project could cost 24% more. So I think the contingencies we've been including have been around the 20% mark for that reason. There may be opportunity to break out the projects into separate contracts so that you can have federal money funding one thing and another. We haven't gotten into that level of detail, but be certain that we are aware of potentially the need to do so.
Okay. No, thanks. I mean, I like this. I like those last graphs also, like the high cost of deferred maintenance, but then also thinking, what do we need to factor in to maintain our new infrastructure so that our future selves are not confronting this?
I can't say that Burlington will ever need another bond, but what will happen as a function of our bond covenant is that when we borrow, say, $1 million, we actually have to raise 1.25 million to cover and give ourselves a buffer in case something goes wrong. And typically, because assuming we don't have some crazy fluctuation in our demand, that money can often go in the bank and can be used, and my model does assume some use of that building reserve, but it puts us on a very different financial trajectory than we've been in, where we might actually have significant funds in year 5 and 6 to potentially buy down, the next, like the stage 3, right? Which I can't tell you exactly what the numbers are, but there's still a fair amount that has to be done at the plants. But I'm hoping that we're gonna be able to pay for some of that with the reserve that we've built up and not just pure bonding. So it's very interesting as the financial modeler to like see how our lives may change, and it's like anything else in the world, right? Once you start to have a little money and assets, then sometimes things get easier.
Thanks.
Any other quick questions?
Yeah. So you'd say overall, right, in contrast to what's happened in the past in terms of the annual rate increase percent over these next 10 or so years, it's going to be about an equal change every year, or
It's like 3 years of 18-ish, between 18 and 20, and then 2 years of about 12.
all right?
And then it drops back down, at least as currently modeled.
I noticed it was kind of a little bit of a serpentine shape, but
Yeah, I tried to kind of put the percentages roughly in magnitude of what the increase is.
yeah, and I think it's awesome if that could be communicated at public meetings that like, hey, there is a plan, right? There's a way that things are looking to go.
Yeah.
And it's not gonna be something unpredictable, right? By buying into these bonds, it is something that is expected and masterfully thought through. So thank you for all the modeling parts, especially.
You're welcome.
Any other quick questions? Yes, Commissioner.
Yeah, thanks for all your work on this. Seeing the models and the graphs are great. In terms of that survey that had the 5% average annual increase, was that scaled at all for capacity?
That was not presuming that their rates themselves were already sort of maybe scaled for capacity, but I can think about that more. It's really, it's hard, and I think one of Burlington's challenges is just the economy of scale. Like, we still need the same length of pipes, but I don't have more people per square foot, like you do in Boston, and so our costs per gallon would be higher than a larger community potentially. There's probably some break point because they just have that many more ratepayers and they're building up, so.
Yeah, and I was also thinking about population growth in Burlington over that area compared to other places, but there are plenty of places in the US that didn't have huge population growth as well, so.
Yeah.
But.
Oh, right, like that is also an impact to our rates because we haven't had major growth, yes, absolutely. Like if we had had a whole bunch of people connecting, anytime we get new connections, that is revenue, that means no rate increases for everybody else, to the extent that you're spreading it out over a larger base. One of the things I didn't get into is we are looking at impact fees. So for people who are coming in, buying into the existing equity that basically ratepayers have already paid into, and then also as we look at the expansion amount, you're able to also assign some of that to new connections, though you can't double charge them. So if they're gonna be a ratepayer and they're gonna be paying debt service, you have to figure out, you can only charge them for the equity part that's in the system. Yeah. Oh, sorry.
Thank you very much.
I have one quick question. I think or comment, I think really, once again, I think the affordability piece is gonna be key. And I can't remember at the last meeting when more details of I know you gave a little insight into the affordability programs now, when some of those will be more finalized in terms of the timeline.
Yeah, I think, so we're hoping to work with the TOOC to really narrow down like maybe what the priorities are, which types of people we're trying to help. I also have on my task list to work with our financial consultant to really look at true affordability, like as we get up there and you look at the quartiles of different income, which parts of the city are really going to be impacted the most, and then make sure that we're tailoring those programs to them. I think the communication or the conversation that needs to be happening in the community is, are other people willing to pay more so that people who are more income burdened can pay less for their water to make sure they're not having to make crazy decisions about like medicine versus paying their utility bill. So that's really the sort of policy level decision that I think we would love your engagement and support in. Obviously easier when you look at the numbers, and I am gonna start playing with the numbers on the tiered sewer rate. And then potentially, right now we just discount the fixed portion of the bill for folks who qualify for the low income discount. And I'm gonna look at potentially some sort of discount on the volumetric portion, because it's gonna be hard for the folks who are, even at the 200% poverty level, to keep up with some of this.
Okay, great. Thank you.
So, ideally December we would have some ideas, and then before we actually get the vote from the council, I think hopefully it would be as firm as possible, maybe not with all the details worked out, but some directions that we could commit to, say in the resolution, that they would pass to authorize us moving forward, where they would clearly say, before we allow you to issue these bonds, X, Y, and Z needs to be in place. Because there's a lot of work in between, implementing it and whatnot.
Okay. Great.
Okay? Thanks. And thanks
Thank you.
for moving around your agenda.
Thank you.
Good luck at the Ward 47 NPA.
Yes, I'll be interested to see what they think about the siphon, removing the siphon from there.
Still getting it done, just another way.
Yep.
Moving on to the consent agenda. Oh, yes, sorry, thank you. Public forum. It's much bigger on the piece of paper, yes. Let's see.
Is there anybody else?
Yeah, is there anybody online for public?
Yeah, we do have a member of the public,
Great.
Sharon Busher. You are up to speak.
Hi, good evening. This is Sharon Busher, and I wanted to speak to a couple of things on your agenda tonight. One has to do with the discussion around speed humps, rubber speed humps, and the option that the staff is recommending is a 2.75-inch speed hump, and I believe those were the ones that were tried on Grove Street. And I can tell you that because I go that way and I don't speed, they are, I would call them almost dangerous, because they're really high and they really jar you even when you're going 2 miles an hour. And a lot of people slam on their brakes, almost crash into the next person. The person behind them isn't anticipating that. I understand they're cost effective, but I really wish you would go with the rubber speed hump that is more in keeping with how regular speed humps are. And I really don't know how plows and other things will navigate that in the winter when the roads are covered with snow. So anyways, I'm just talking about safety, and I don't find them particularly safe. They reduce speed, but they, I think, are dangerous. So that's number one. Number two is, I have heard Megan's presentation. She is such a skilled presenter, and it's so clear. However, I think that there are categories of people. There are those in the workforce who have incomes that could increase and potentially can get multiple jobs. There are a lot of people with more than one job, as we know, just trying to make ends meet. Our community, yes, I saw where we land, but our community also faces what other communities are not facing, which is a school bond, which I support. But and then we've got increased taxes. I really am concerned about the proposal. And I listened to her again, and I understand consolidation over time would be the most effective way to deal with this. It's about $31 million, and it would save $30 million in the next 50 years. But I am a person who is on a fixed income now. And I'm facing the point where I don't have the money to build an ADU. I'm at the point where I don't know if I can continue to live in Burlington. And I'm really sad about saying that, but that's the reality. So I'm very concerned about this water rate increase. And I'm not saying I don't agree with the need. So that's the other thing that I wanted to talk about. The last thing, and I know I'm running out of time, but I wanted to say that as far as the Winooski Bridge and the intersection Colchester, Riverside, and Barrett Street intersection, there's a lot of controversy about that, as you know. I'm kind of surprised that there hasn't been more of an effort by the city, not regional planning, but by the city, to hold meetings in our region, in Ward 1. You know, with the Champlain Parkway, you really focused on that section of the city and that neighborhood. And I'm disappointed that there hasn't been more of an effort to do that on a continuous basis. So I just wanted to put that out there for consideration. And the last thing is on the news, they were talking about the Main Street closure, South Winooski, North Winooski Avenue, and Main Street closure during the holiday season. I know it's a really big ask to change that schedule. I get it. I really do. But I also know that if we lose businesses, we're going to lose sales tax, gross receipts tax, and then it's going to be all on the residents, and the city will lose far more. And I know it's up to Ireland, and Chapin, I wish you the best in trying to navigate this difficult situation, but I so hope that you can do that to deliver some relief and help for the business community. Thank you.
Thank you. Rob, anyone else online for public comment?
No, that's all.
Great. Moving on to the consent agenda.
I move to adopt the consent agenda.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye for myself. Any nays? Moving on to the Winooski Bridge intersection.
All right, thank you for the opportunity for us to be able to present on this project. This is a very exciting opportunity for us to make a more than generational reinvestment in a 100-year-old bridge, nearly 100-year-old bridge, and a challenging intersection immediately adjacent to it. We have great working relationships with the city of Winooski and our federal and state partners. In particular, the bridge itself is owned 50-50 between the city of Winooski and the city of Burlington. Without participation from our state and federal partners, we'd be looking at a 50% share. The bridge itself is going to be around $80 million. That is a huge burden for us to bear. With this partnership approach, our local match for the bridge and the intersection is around $3 to $4 million, and has also enabled us to address two issues together: one, the intersection, and one, the bridge, which are two differently scoped projects, but ones that we can unite together to a much better improvement. So these opportunities to work with our partners don't continue forever, as the commissioners were asking earlier about the changing federal and state landscape. These projects are, one is grant funded and the other depends on continued state and federal funding. So time is of the essence here. We want to get your feedback on the base technical concept, which we will be going to the city council. We went to their last meeting, but we'll be asking for their approval to sign off on the base technical concept at their December meeting, either the 9th or the 16th. Okay, just the 16th. And one of our presenters is unexpectedly out, but Maddie Swender will guide us through the presentation. Thanks for being here.
Laura is promoted.
Oh, is she? Okay, great.
So I'm Maddie Sender, a public works engineer with the city of Burlington. As Chapin mentioned, we're here to talk about the Winooski Bridge and the Colchester Riverside Barrett intersection. So I am joined by Laura Wheelock online, the city engineer. Our other project partners are V-Trans, their design consultant, HNTV, as well as the city of Winooski, which none of them are in attendance tonight, but just so you have some names there. So the agenda for tonight is to go over the purpose of the meeting, a recap of the project thus far, getting into the design details for the base technical concept, and then next steps, scheduling and funding. So the purpose of tonight's meeting is to go over future commission approvals that will come along with this ultimate construction, as well as get input prior to seeking approval, which, as Chapin mentioned, is at the December 16th City Council meeting. To give you an idea of where we are in the schedule, we have the concept design, which is about 30%. That's what we are referring to as the base technical concept. That has gone through environmental and right-of-way clearances and permitting. We would be looking to solicit contractors in 2025 and then ultimately construct in 2027 with an completion date of 2029. So for a recap and update on the project, we have there are two separate projects that we are advancing together. So the bridge is separate from the intersection. This is roughly the limits of the work. They directly interface with each other, so they are being advanced for efficiencies in contracting, design. The past schedule essentially started with project identification. There were studies done for each of the projects. Then grant funding was secured, as well as federal funding for the intersection. This all was accompanied with public engagement and engagement through the scoping studies and also through the project thus far for the actual design and construction. So some of that public engagement and coordination is listed here. We have met with various stakeholders stemming from other departments, emergency services, and all the others listed here. We have engaged with the public through various meetings, websites and e-blasts, surveys, and coordination meetings. We are at the point now where we are in the project refinement stage. We are now merging the projects to advance them together, assessing and confirming scoping decisions, alternate construction phasing and traffic management throughout construction, as well as the intersection configuration, which we will get into. So these were the two options that we looked at, an on-alignment bridge and a shifted alignment bridge. The shifted alignment bridge is ultimately what we're recommending for the base technical concept. You'll see here the main difference is the duration of the detour. The shifted alignment has a longer detour, but has fewer lanes detoured, which we will explain a little more in the next slide. So the top figure there shows the current traffic patterns, which right now the detour route, which is highlighted here, is all operating relatively well, green being the best and red being the worst. Most of these sections are green and yellow, so essentially normal traffic flow, some congestion. The fully closed lanes, which would happen with the on-alignment bridge, would essentially have stop-and-go traffic for the entire detour route. For the on-alignment bridge, we're able to keep 2 lanes of northbound traffic open. This allows the detour route to essentially have all right turns, so we gain some efficiency there and have much less red traffic, that stop and go, bumper to bumper type traffic. So the alignment of the bridge directly impacts the intersection alignment. Both alignments are shown here, so the on alignment and the off alignment both meet all of the purpose and need statements of the project. So we would be, as the base technical concept is moving forward with the shifted alignment, this is the alignment which we would be moving forward with, which has the primary movement being Riverside versus Colchester Ave. So getting into the base technical concept, the base technical concept specifies the bridge cross-section, which has 4 travel lanes, all 11-foot wide, 2-foot shoulders on either side, and then shared use paths, which after a lot of community feedback, we have increased the shared use path on the downstream side of the bridge to 15 feet wide to really allow for that continued movement on the Riverside shared use path onto the bridge and give adequate space for pedestrians and cyclists. These are the conceptual renderings of the project, so they don't have all the details. A lot of the fine-tuned details of landscaping and material types and exact location of sidewalks and things like that are not fully worked out in these, but for the most part, this is a pretty good idea of what the bridge would look like. So the existing conditions are shown here, and then the shifted alignment is shown on your right. This is the same thing, but just looking from the Winooski side. So again, existing conditions versus the shifted alignment. And then this is just another view of that. To get into the construction progression, this is how the bridge would maintain traffic throughout the construction progress. So initially, the new bridge would be partially constructed upstream of the existing bridge, so all lanes of traffic would be maintained. Eventually, they would remove a portion of the existing bridge and maintain those 2 northbound travel lanes, and then transfer existing traffic to the new bridge and completely demo the existing bridge and then fully open the new bridge. So to go over the project funding, the bridge and the intersection both have different funding sources. The bridge is 80% federally funded, 10% state, and then 5% from each city. As Chapin mentioned, the conceptual estimate for the bridge is between $70 and $80 million. The intersection is 100% federally funded, and that conceptual estimate is between $8 and $9 million. Getting into the RFP considerations, the way that this project will be bid is through a design-build process, so we can put in prescriptive and flexible requirements to that. So the prescriptive requirements would be things like the bridge cross-section versus flexible, which are just guidelines for a contractor to work within. So these prescriptive requirements would be things like the bridge cross-section, the 2-span bridge, minimal hydraulic openings, historic requirements, and that it has to be a signalized intersection, versus the flexible requirements, which would be the bridge length, the location, the exact location, we would give them stipulations, the girder spacing, traffic control and schedule, pedestrian phasing, things like the sidewalk, greenbelt, shared use path materials, and stormwater features. So here we can see what the shifted alignment intersection would look like. Some of these flexible requirements that we could get into would be the potential for an under-bridge path, the exact landscaping, the shared use path layout, whether it's right up against the road or set back with a green belt in between, how much of a green belt we maintain, retaining wall types and layout, or street tree location, parking spaces, and the Mill Street crossing materials. So those are just some examples of the more flexible things in the design build process. Again, this is a conceptual rendering of the two different intersection alignments. You can see the difference in these, just two different examples of how the shared use path could be laid out with different materials. So neither of these are decided on yet. That's still where we have some flexibility. To get into the future commission approvals, these were three that we identified. The effectuating the change for the Mill Street intersection to be changed from a signalized intersection to stop controlled. There's about 90 feet of parking within the Colchester intersection that would need to be removed, and then restricting a left turn from Mill Street. Next steps for the project, we have an open house coming up on December 11th. As Chapin mentioned, we'll have the Burlington City Council meeting on the 16th, where we would be looking for ultimate approval of the base technical concept. And in this approval, they could put in draft stipulations for, which I included in your materials, some examples. The RFP and RFQ development would come after that, and then continued coordination with right-of-way, environmental commitments, and utility relocations. And that's it.
City Engineer Laura Wheelock, would you like to add anything to that?
Nope, I was just thinking Maddie did a great job.
Agreed. Happy to take your questions.
Great, thank you. Questions, we'll start over on the left side. Commissioner Davis?
Okay, in terms of the ownership structure of the bridge for things like liability, if anything was to happen, covering maintenance and repairs, is that also shared 50-50 with Winooski? Okay.
We own the bridge 50-50 with Winooski, so I believe we maintain the full bridge, though. I think we do full snow operations and things like that.
We tend to do the full snow removal operation, but in the past, when we have collaborated 50-50 on things like railing repairs and other improvements.
It's gonna just continue with the new bridge. Okay, that's all.
Yeah.
All I had.
Great. Commissioner Sears?
No, that was very complete. Thank you. Just a quick question about Mill Street. So no left turn from Mill Street. Can you get out of that car park? Is there a cut through onto Barrett? Okay.
There is. It's privately owned. We are kind of looking into that and how, if that's worth trying to pursue further. And there's a very steep slope to get out of there, so
Yeah.
it's somewhat limited, but we're still exploring what exactly can be done there.
Do you want to talk about how cars can get out and hit the circulator?
Yes, so cars can make a left there and then go through the circulator and come back. And in the traffic modeling, that took less time than it would for them to wait for a gap that would likely not be as safe to cross that much traffic. And because there would be such few gaps, they might not be fully adequate, so.
So just go right, go around the.
Yes, sorry, right.
That's fine.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Great. No, good presentation, and love the federal funds for this kind of project. And I really appreciate just the clarity on separating it and where those funds are going to come from. So good job. Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Matino?
Yes. Awesome presentation. And I also reviewed the presentation at City Council on Monday, too. It's certainly a really exciting project. I just want clarification that the actual alignment of the intersection and the bridge itself is at this point a flexible requirement. Is that right?
So we are moving forward, and Laura, please correct me if I say anything wrong here, but we are moving forward with the base technical concept, which would essentially put in that is our preferred option. But if a contractor were to have a means and method that allowed them to do the on-alignment bridge extremely efficiently and for a better cost while still meeting all of the requirements of the project, they could put that forward. So it is not totally ruled out that there wouldn't be an on-alignment bridge, but we are moving forward with recommending the curved alignment.
All right, I think I understand. And the ultimate alignment of the bridge itself is intimately linked to whether or not the through traffic would prioritize movement onto Riverside from the north to the south versus Colchester, right? Those are essentially can't be separated, right? Depending on where the bridge ends up. That's
the bridge alignment directly correlates to whether the intersection lines up the movement on Colchester and Riverside or on Riverside versus Colchester.
Okay, so as I understand it, it is still not certain, right? We're not at a place where it could be said which of these two options would be the one.
Yes.
However, a roundabout is at this point totally excluded. It is the understanding that that would not be accepted.
Yes.
Okay, thanks for clarifications on that.
Yeah.
And I guess my last question was, it is a single design build contract, right? So single would cover the work on the bridge itself, which has a certain funding scheme allocated to it, as well as the work on the Burlington side at the intersection, which has a different funding scheme, but it would be a single contract awarded.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you for all of those clarifications.
Yep.
This has been extremely helpful.
Thank you.
Commissioner Barr?
Thanks. That's my backyard, so this has been excellent. I've walked across that bridge many times, and I will say that I did some walk audits, and the existing conditions are horrible, as we know. Let alone having two pedestrians try and walk by each other on that. If a person on a wheelchair, which I've seen, and then another person on a bike, it just stops. So I'm excited to see that. The only question I have, and I know this is still in such initial phases, is the bike flow. I love having the traffic go to Riverside Avenue because it's much better than whizzing by my house. But I know that there's going to be people that are going to want to go up Colchester Avenue, and there is a left-hand turn lane there I can see on the curved alignment. I like that idea, and I'm just curious how it's going to pan out as it moves forward in the process. But also with bikes, there's going to be bikes coming down Colchester Avenue, and how are they going to negotiate? Because it looks like there's a sidewalk on one side, maybe in a wider path on the west side. Is that true?
So,
It's a bike lane, and then there's going to be the transition to the shared use path.
yep.
That was a question I had.
I think if I can start, Maddie, it may help set the context. So we are in the middle of reviewing a lot of those traffic numbers, Counselor or Commissioner Barr. The first preliminary indication is that actually the bike traffic is much heavier, the Riverside path across the bridge, like 3 to 1. Based on the counts that have been reported back to us so far. So the bicycle movements coming off Colchester are somewhat minimal, but we are still providing bike lanes. We are providing on-off ramps similar to what happened around the roundabout so that bikes can get on and use the shared use paths. And they will also be able to use the crosswalks around the intersection. Similar to how pedestrians are allowed. They are allowed to use those crosswalks as well by our ordinances. And then there's an opportunity on the Winooski side of the bridge to, better opportunity on the Winooski side of the bridge to move yourself around to the other side if that's where your desire line is. So that's the bikes. Maddie, if you wanted to keep going with the rest of the question.
Did that answer your
Yeah,
question?
it did, and as I know that as things progress, there's probably gonna be some minor changes. I know that I use Riverside, but I'm usually not gonna go down to the Winooski Bridge to go back into Burlington. I usually go up Colchester Avenue. And when I go to Winooski, I go down Colchester Avenue, so I particularly use that, and I can't remember how many years ago we took the parking off so that we could have the uphill climbing lane, so that it's intended, and there's a plan in the future for potentially changing the parking up between Centennial and Greenmount, that area there for parking, to have bike lanes and so forth. So when we set it up for the infrastructure, I think you're gonna get, right now I'm sure it's a 3-to-1 ratio because there's much wider and shared paths on Riverside Avenue. But I also look at it like if you, it's like Field of Dreams, if you build it, they'll come. Just because you don't have as much on Colchester Avenue, if you built it properly, you might have more. So I'm just coming from that perspective. Either way, I think this is gonna be so much better than it is now. So I'm excited for that. And I appreciate that. That's all I have right now.
Thank you.
Vice Chair Fox?
Yeah, I'll say I had the same sort of question about particularly the movement going south up Colchester Avenue. And to that end, I guess I'm curious, you want our input, is it like, are there specific things that we can comment on that would be helpful? Like, I think all of us understand that this design is your preference and is sort of like as it is, but there are those flexible elements. So is that what you're looking for our feedback on? I just want clarification on that. Okay.
Yeah.
So,
I think any concerns you have will be good to kind of understand, as well as any aesthetic things that you require, that you would like for the bridge. We have a lot more flexibility on that end and are seeking, we have a survey that's going to be published very soon and kind of debuted at the open house to really get a lot of feedback on that as well.
okay.
One piece I would just name is that in our letter recommending the base technical concept will be the things that we want required and the things we want preferred. So getting a good input from you and the council and the community now is going to enable us to write the best draft letter for the council's review.
Okay. Okay, well, I'm not really sure if this falls in those like flexible things, but I guess I'm thinking about for those bikes that want to go up Colchester Ave from the bridge, because they exist. If you live in Winooski and you're going up to UVM, like getting from that shared use path to Colchester Ave, you have to effectively go to the Riverside intersection, cross, and then go up, right? Could we include like sharrows and bikes may use full lane? Like, is that an element that would make sense at this stage, or is that like a later on thing? Anyway, that's something I'm saying I think would be good if this is our design.
Yeah.
Bike box too.
Or a bike box, sure, yeah.
Yeah.
That was just one thought. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay,
Yep.
cool. I just want to make sure this is like constructive.
Yeah.
I forgot to mention, so that's perfect.
Yeah, because, yeah, I can think of a time that we have biked across
I
that
know.
bridge and biked up Colchester Ave. Especially people on e-bikes, right? They're not gonna, and if they're going up the hill, like, they're not gonna want to take that shared use path, even if it's, a few select few people. Yeah, I guess those were my only comments. I kind of just wanted to make sure that they were like constructive and within the realm of what you're looking for.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, I think I echo a lot of the same comments. I think for me, just given conversations from public comment and just other sort of community-wide conversations around all the construction happening around the city, I guess my comment is around more on what are the lessons learned and what are the ways during the actual construction phase that we can be more prescriptive in there, because it sounded like a lot of the sort of, during the construction phase, a lot of it was in the sort of flexible space, and I'm curious if there's anything that staff has thought about around being maybe more prescriptive in construction piece and traffic control piece in particular, given that there's 4 to 6 months where there's only, what was it, northbound traffic? So I'm just curious sort of how staff has sort of thought about that.
Yes, HNTB, the design team, has been modeling the detour route and what that will look like, and is already looking at what kind of improvements need to be made along that route. And we're also working with all of our stakeholders, specifically emergency services, to really understand what detours will work for them. And yeah, so I think we are working.
Is there the ability to be more, I don't know, in other contracts, is there the ability to be more prescriptive in those traffic control plans and other sort of items that impact sort of the day-to-day use of folks going through the sort of pains of navigating this during the final result, which I think looks great?
Yep. Yes, and I did forget to mention that one of the things that will be required in the traffic control plan is that pedestrian and bike accommodations will be made throughout construction. So
Okay.
we are building in detour-specific requirements.
Great. Awesome.
Just to give a little bit of a highlight of that, because Maddie went through the slides very fast, but the choice to make with this preferred alternative, allowing 2 northbound lanes across the bridge for the 4 to 6 months, bike ped access is maintained through the downstream sidewalk. It allows for a right turn only detour. Getting on exit 15 as a right turn, getting off the interstate as a right turn, and generally all other points from there are a right turn, which makes it a little bit faster of a movement through intersections. But the things that they've already identified that are necessities is striping the interstate to be 3 lanes between 14 and 15 in that southbound direction. We've talked to the state police about that. We've talked to other VTrans folks about that. The exit 14 off-ramp will need to become 2 lanes for the full width or length of it to be able to accommodate this other change. And so there's things like that. They're looking at the timing of the signals just for the change in the traffic flow. We don't have all of the specifics. Those are literally just the same words that were shared with us during some of our check-ins. But after we get our permits submitted and can start that review period, those are the other next step details of just understanding what this is going to look like, and then helping to include and develop and kind of contain what we don't want, and parameter that out, and then kind of leave what we can allow as something for a contractor or a team to propose on.
Great, thank you. Yeah, I think that'd be great, and once more details are finalized for that, I think that'd be great to bring back to the commission.
Those are the things that are going to change our lives for this construction period. So yes, once we have a better idea what they are, we will be sharing them.
Awesome. Rob, any members of the public who have a comment on this?
We don't have anyone with their hands raised at this time.
Great. So let's move forward to item 7, Tactical Transportation Initiative Recap.
Thank you.
Thanks, Maddie.
Thank you.
Thank you, Maddie and Laura.
Thanks, Laura.
All right, do we have Philip remotely? Great.
I'm here.
We don't believe you, we don't see you. Oh, there you
All right.
Just like,
Can you
like just take the lead. Yes. So heroin. Yeah.
Excellent. Hey. So I have 3 items to discuss. I will try and keep my comments as brief as possible because I know, these meetings get pretty long. We'll start with we'll kick off the tactical traffic calming initiatives item. We'll start with an update on the use of rubber speed humps as part of our ongoing efforts to implement traffic calming measures across the city. You kind of know the details. We have several traffic calming requests in the queue. I think we're up to 59 or 60. It was 52 when we came back in June. These measures are intended to slow down vehicle traffic, improve safety, particularly for pedestrians and cyclists, but really all road users. We definitely know that when we have traffic calming initiatives, folks in vehicles get a benefit, safety benefit as well. So the rubber speed humps were selected for the cost effectiveness, of course, and the ability to be quickly installed and removed And so the 3 streets we selected for this pilot project were Gosport, Elmwood Avenue, and Grove Street. And they were chosen based on traffic volume, geographic location, and existing requests for traffic calming. Gosport, a low volume residential street in the New North End, was selected to test the effectiveness of traffic calming in quieter, more residential areas. Elmwood Avenue, a collector street in the Old North End, was chosen because of it has a higher traffic volume and its role as a connector between neighborhoods. And then lastly, Grove Street, located in the East End. It's a high traffic street. A lot of actually commercial truck traffic, contractors, which sees a significant amount of concern regarding speeding. And it is probably one of the higher 85th percentile speeds due to the density of traffic and its proximity to busy intersections. So while the rubber speed humps have generally been effective at reducing speeds and improving safety, the feedback from residents has been mixed. On the positive side, many residents expressed that speed humps have made their streets feel safer, particularly for pedestrians and cyclists. And the data that we've gathered in the memo, you can see it shows a pretty significant reduction in the 85th percentile speed with an average decrease of around 10 miles per hour. There was a noticeable drop in percentage of vehicles exceeding the posted speed limit as well. So usually you have those, jerks that will step on the gas and, really rev it up. And that was reduced by 20%. And that was really good. So we did engage in some fairly robust public engagement. We presented at all the MPAs this past fall, September, and a little bit in October. Once the speed humps were in place, we set up signs with QR codes linking to project website where people could fill out surveys and provide comments. Some of the feedback, very positive. However, we did receive some concerns. I think Sharon Busher pointed out the noise levels caused by vehicles driving over the speed humps. This was especially evident on the higher volume streets, Grove Street and Elmwood Avenue. Many drivers found the speed humps uncomfortable to drive over, and some reported that the noise created by vehicles traversing the humps was pretty significant disturbance. And it is true. Grove Street in particular, especially in the early morning hours when contractors would drive through, they would have their trailers on the back and they hit the speed hump and really make a really loud bang. And I'm sure that our friend in the East End there, he heard all about it, probably could hear it from his house. I actually went to one of the residents' houses early in the morning, and this gentleman insisted that I join him for a cup of coffee on his porch. And we sat there and we listened to the contractors come through, and it was definitely loud. So we did collect data on that. And we also received feedback regarding the inconvenience caused by the rubber speed humps, especially for drivers who need to adjust their speeds and maneuver around them, which honestly is kind of like a good thing in my opinion, because trying to slow you down. So they are effective for sure. So if you look at the data, Grove Street, before installation, the 85th percentile speed, and the 85th percentile speed is that speed that's what the street is. That's kind of what we're looking at. Grove Street was 33. After installation, 22. So that's really good. Elmwood Avenue, 27, which isn't horrible, but it's still above our city speed limit. But after installation, 18 miles per hour. Couldn't get data on Gosport. Our streets team removed the speed humps on Gosport before we were able to set up data collection devices. But I live in the neighborhood, and I think we have enough data to really get a feel for what it is. So the data supports our findings that the rubber speed humps have been successful in reducing speeds and improving safety. For higher volume streets, the noise and driver discomforts, it's going to kind of lead us to explore other options that can maintain the benefits of traffic calming without the downsides associated with the noise. It really is kind of a life quality issue. So, but we will be looking at other products over the winter, and I guess let's have the conversation. I'm happy to answer some questions.
Great, thank you, Philip. Commissioner comments. Let's start with Commissioner Sears.
Yeah, it sounds like they worked. And I guess the noise issue, if you were to look at other traffic calming issues, you might lose the cost savings. That was the appeal of these rubber speed humps.
Well, there's other things that we can do. So we can visually narrow the street. So curb extensions with bollards and paint. That's something that we can look at doing. There are other speed hump-like materials. So we can do vertical things, but we can also do horizontal things. There's other low-cost solutions that we can look at. I think the important thing is when we try these things out, we need to try them out because we need kind of a buffet of options to look at to install. Now we know what this tool is and where it'll work, and I think we can roll these rubber speed humps out on more of the low volume residential streets. I think it would definitely be effective on those lower volume streets. It's just now we know what that one is. So what are we going to try next year? And I think we have a good idea on some of the things that we're going to try next year. But it's all about money, so we got to figure out what we can afford to do.
No, I think that's great. I think it's been, I know it's frustrating for people to, you can wait for traffic calming for 5 years, then it can take 5 years. So I think it's a really, really good approach to have something that's hopefully a little bit quicker to implement. And I have to say I like the idea of speed humps that you actually have to slow down for, because there are those like really flat ones that, no offense, but I mean, I just wouldn't even bother with those. I think we have one of those on my street. We have one that actually works, and then one that is not really worth was not worth putting in. So that's exciting. Yeah, I guess I like the idea of traffic calming not being this really, really scarce resource that you have to kind of just hope is bestowed upon your street, but that it can be something that's available to really any neighborhood, every neighborhood. So thank you. That sounds like a great solution. I'm done.
Commissioner O'Neill-Vivanco?
Thanks. Yeah. I did drive on Grove Street several times and agree with that. And there are lots of speed humps, bumps, tables, whatever other street furniture we want to call them. Those felt like a pretty acute kind of shock as driving across. So agree with the sound. I also wonder about the placement given the crossing from the car park to the playground at Szymanska, and wondering, I mean, first of all, I'm sorry, I back up. I love this concept that it's quick and it's easy, it's tactical. But how to kind of fine tune it. So clearly we have data that show that this is really calming, and then looking at how to tweak an implementation, especially along Grove Street. What are the mechanisms to take this information? So we've got good data, but we also have feedback from residents that, especially because of that traffic, that those particular bumps are maybe not the best application.
Yeah.
Grove Street is a puzzle, and we're gonna have to look at what we can do to solve it.
And because you have a lot of traffic that kind of cuts through, and there are big trucks, that I think it's really important. So
Yes.
I would hate to see us kind of twiddle our thumbs for too long, but look at how do we kind of crack that nut.
I think you're onto something about the cross-section of the device itself, and the devices we had were abrupt and worked well in low-volume areas. I'm confident we can find a different cross-section that may be more appropriate for higher traffic streets like Grove.
Okay, great. Thank you. Great work.
Definitely worked on Grove in terms of reducing the speed, but the consequences of that were, is the juice worth the squeeze, right?
Love it. Thank you.
Commissioner Davis?
All right. This was noted in the, what you wrote in the memo, but I am a bit concerned about kind of a holistic aspect of traffic, and is traffic calming on one street, just redistributing the issue to other streets? Is there already monitoring in place that would capture that sort of thing?
Yeah, so we do know that, it's like a water balloon, right? You squeeze and it's gonna go somewhere else. So yeah, we can't look at it in terms of, well, this street has a request and, like Stanberry, if we're gonna do something there, we know that there's other streets that connect to that network of neighborhoods. If the Five Sisters neighborhood, if we did something on, Locust and didn't do something on, Caroline, which I think already has something, but we just know that folks are going to go around that. They're going to redistribute, which was kind of what happened as a result of the Stanford speed humps. Stanford speed humps, people were taking a left on Shore and then speeding down Stanbury to get around having to go over those speed humps. So you make a very good point. So we try and look at these things holistically, but it is, it's how many resources do we have? So we have to think through those things as well. But it's a good point, and it is something that we'll discuss when we look at what streets we're gonna do next year, what the rollout's gonna be, and what we can afford.
I guess partly on the idea of measurement, is the winter and summer, are they so distinct in terms of traffic patterns that they're not comparable, or are they similar enough that you can kind of have a control group being the winter and the summer be your experimental group?
Well, in the time period that we live in now in climate change, what is winter? When does it actually begin? When I was a kid, heck, there'd be snow on the ground by now. We'd be getting ready for hockey season, but it's kind of a difficult thing. But we do know that the rubber speed humps, we don't want them to be in place when the plows come out, because they'll just get destroyed. They'll just get obliterated by the plows. So, yeah, that's kind of the reason that they come out in wintertime.
Yeah. We think that there's a reasonable balance here. In the summer, it's later. There's more youth on the street. School's not in session.
That's true too.
And so fundamentally, we believe for this low-cost solution, you get 2/3 of the year at the time when there's more activity out on the street. It makes sense. And also when the streets are icy and snowy, people aren't going as fast. So I think it's a good balance and worth to continue to expand, but how we expand, I think you all are identifying we need to tweak things.
My last question was on the safety polling, and how, to me, there was an alarming amount of people that found safety to have decreased, like to be a major issue post installation. I suspect there is a strategic effect there.
Yeah.
Yeah, where people are reporting that just because they don't like the policy overall. I think it's most likely to be people that, want to speed.
That's most likely what it is, I would say. And I mean, what we have that we can look at is data, right? We have data to look at. We can show that the 85th percentile speed was reduced to 10 miles per hour and more on all three streets, and that's the effect that we were looking for. And we know that reduced speeds increases safety. So I don't know how these devices could decrease safety unless you are speeding. So yeah, I think that you're correct. I think there's a little bit of a pejorative attitude about the work.
I think that's probably, it may be all of it. I think it's definitely the majority of it, but I do wonder if there's some other issue that I suspect safety is not the right word for it. I don't know what it might be, but like not the longest
just-
part, not the not like a true are there more wrecks or not kind of measure. But I do wonder if there's something that's not adequately captured. I don't know if maybe in the I think it mentioned in some of the surveys have like an open response field. If maybe someone brought something up that you thought, oh, maybe this is what people are talking about.
No, I don't. Yeah.
All right, yeah, I was hoping, but maybe not.
I think, Philip, what are your thoughts? I think the abruptness, there were people who were seeing the speed humps and thinking they could cross them at 20 miles an hour, but given the approach, I think there's probably some people just saying that without knowing how to safely get across it at 10 miles an hour, that it really seemed to rattle the driver. So that would be my other thought.
Yeah, I mean, I think it probably made some folks uncomfortable. It probably, maybe shocked some drivers. Then they went, "Oh man, this must be unsafe because it's making me uncomfortable." But in general, yeah, I'd have to look a little bit more in depth onto that one. I can understand that. I drove over them several times, and yeah, it can be jarring. Wake you up, test your suspension.
All right, thanks.
Great. Commissioner Montano?
Yeah, I was gonna touch on a lot of the same things when it came to that survey, and I don't know, my guess was about the same, right? It just didn't feel good. It doesn't feel safe or whatever. But clearly it had the desired effect in terms of the speed reduction. And even on the perception of is speed a problem, there was a little bit of shift in the survey, but I know as we could see from the data, people really are using the road differently, and we know a slower road is a safer road, and it is getting us closer to the goals that we want. That's people being safe on the road, no matter what mode they're using. So my question is actually about the next stages. We have, I guess, some number of these treetop style rubber speed humps. Is there already a plan for how they're going to be deployed next year? And did we learn anything from doing this experiment on the 3 different busynesses of road, 3 different kinds of roads in the network?
I think this is a good tool for low volume streets, for sure, low volume residential streets. And it's something that we can look at. We haven't really had a chance, Julie and I, to sit down and just like, okay, what's the list of traffic calming streets? And what are the low volume residential streets that we think this will work on? So yeah, I in my mind, I mean, I haven't really had a chance to sit down and talk to Chapin about it, but next year with this particular product, I think we could roll it out less as a pilot and more of like, this is more implementation on just a certain number of streets. What those streets are, I'm not sure yet.
Right. Yeah, thanks for that. I agree wholeheartedly, and I support that. It seemed, especially in the Elmwood, in the Old North End neighborhood, a lot of the written feedback seemed positive, at least from the summary you provided there. But I have one final question about the average daily traffic. I noticed on Elmwood Avenue, it dropped from about 1,200 to about 600. And I'm trying to think whether or not that might be indicative of some local, drivers that learned about the speed humps, use this route regularly, detouring to other routes, or if there could be another explanation there.
Well, it goes back to what we had just discussed with the other commissioner, that you squeeze that balloon, drivers are going to go, I don't want to, I'm going around, not, it's
neighborhood where it's a
significant
little
number.
tough with
That's right.
the street being cut off right there as well. Like you're kind of
Exactly.
forced there, and it still seems that maybe drivers are seeking out even longer routes to avoid
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
But at least in that area, right? I'm glad that it's having the desired effect for the residents, and hopefully sound and all of the other stuff is something that can be mitigated, and these products can be used in the way that's most useful for our city. That's all. Thank you.
Commissioner Ware?
Thanks. The most controversial one is in my backyard as well, so I can talk about that. I filled out the survey, and I only did
I'm
it
sorry, Jim.
once, and I tried to petition my kids and my wife to do one as well, but I didn't want to stuff the ballot box. I will say this, I do understand the noise because it's right in front of a couple of people's houses, and there's a decrease from years ago when Ireland Industries had Bayberry Commons as a place, and those dump trucks and cement trucks and everything would go back and forth. So there's fewer, but then other ones come that way. I will point out that if you squeeze this balloon, there's no other place for them to go because this is the only cut through.
That's it.
So like
That's it.
Winooski, when they want to go to the airport, that's the way they go, pretty much. That's how they cut through, and I understand it. I guess, were they too extreme? I don't think so. And I think traffic was significantly decreased, because I would often walk there to get to the park. That's the way I go, instead of cutting through some of the lanes to get there. And I liked seeing traffic go slower. And the ones that felt unsafe were the ones that tried to gun it, maybe, and then realized and, maybe bit their tongue as they went across it. And that's just, after time, maybe they weren't there long enough for people to understand, hey, I've got to go slow in this area because we've got these speed bumps. Having said all that, I also put in my survey, if we do remove them or if we can add to them, should we move them further down to the park area? And so that corridor from all of South Burlington is supposed to be 25 all the way through. And I regularly get comments from people like, oh, that should be 35. That should be 35 in there. Why? Well, if South Burlington has 25 and we have 25, why would you make a tenth of a mile segment 35 miles an hour just so you can speed up and slow down? And so I'm thinking if you pushed those rubber speed bumps further towards the park, maybe that would just as a gateway into that very narrow area where there's parking on one side and sometimes it's difficult to negotiate. That might be an answer for another test to see. And if you don't want to put them there, I'm happy to have them in front of my house up on Chase Street, and I promise I won't call and complain about the noise. I promise. That'll slow people coming off of Colchester Avenue. But I like them, and I know that there's a lot of folks that don't, and that's just because we're making them take an extra 10 seconds in their commute. I'm sorry, but our neighborhood is not just a pass-through. It's a community. And so I'm very excited about potentially doing this again because I like slow traffic. Thanks.
Vice Chair Fox?
I had the same question as Commissioner Montano about what's next, so I guess I'll leave that there. Philip, something you said reminded me of Loomis Street and the planters. I guess the horizontal traffic calming, and so I don't know. I'm sorry to not ask questions about the speed humps, but
It's okay.
I guess I'm wondering how, right? That's an example. So we know how those work on one type of street in our community. So what do we know about that and the possibility of implementing something like those in other parts where these vertical elements are not suitable? I don't know. Sorry, kind of.
Well, no, it's okay. When you visually narrow the road, right? So we're going to talk about it with the Stanbury Road pedestrian pilot project, right? You create this yield street condition when it's narrower, it makes people slow down, right? And so road diets, great example. We're looking at the possibility of a curb extension coming off Route 127. And just reducing that to one lane next year, just right off of Route 127. So that visually, you won't have those two lanes where people are, flying down the street. You just the one lane on Park Street, just at the, just the curb extension there. Right, so. I can't hear you.
Brought that one up.
That's the next item.
Yeah. That's all I had. I really liked,
Sure.
I really liked this project, and, yeah, I look forward to whatever you think of next.
We're gonna do more,
Yeah.
as much as we can afford.
I'll end with just, I think, echoing a lot of the comments. I think the what's next is clearly top of mind for all of us as commissioners. I think it'd be really helpful at some point this winter, knowing, you all know what you all have an inventory of the rubber speed humps, planters, any other sort of materials that are either in stock or can easily be purchased relatively cheaply. I think it'd be great for us to get an understanding of sort of what are those options and talk through in the winter before potential deployment in the spring. The more like, what are the priorities for the commission? What are the, what areas do we want to see, what approaches? I think one thing I'm hearing pretty clearly from commissioners is a more neighborhood approach, so not doing it one street. I think of where I live in the Old North End, there's plenty of streets close together that, a lot of streets that don't necessarily qualify for sort of traffic calming under some of the stuff, that's listed.
But they will, they
Right.
will.
Right, but I think, that's where a sort of more neighborhood approach, I think, is, I think, a priority for myself, and I think others might echo that same approach as well for another implementation or pilot project. So sometime in the
Yes.
later winter before the spring would be great to sort of get that more
We're
comprehensive
committed,
piece.
so we'll come back with a 2025 kind of rollout proposal for your review.
Okay, great.
We are coming in December to discuss kind of the overarching traffic calming program, and we have a traffic calming map in ArcGIS that's almost ready for public publishing. So hopefully that'll be ready for the December.
Good.
Rob, any public comment on this particular item?
We do not have anyone signed up.
Great. Moving on to the next one. Looks like it's Philip again for simplifying traffic regulation.
Well, in Stanbury.
Oh, there's
So
one
we have
more
this-
element. It's part of the same.
I'll make it quick.
Okay.
So just an update on the Stanbury Road pedestrian zone pilot project, which was designed as part of our ongoing efforts to improve active transportation connectivity in the New North End. And this was directly associated with the New North End sidewalk scoping study. So this project kind of addresses this gap in the pedestrian network on Stanbury Road. So Dale Road and Stanbury Road are essentially the same road. And where the Dale Road ends and Stanbury begins, sidewalk ends. So the sidewalk on the east side of the street ends abruptly, and then pedestrians have to share the roadway with vehicles. And there can be some higher speeds on Stanbury. So we came in June and we basically removed parking from the east side of the street, and placed 8-foot tall cones 8 feet from the curb to provide this protected space for pedestrians and cyclists. And this pilot was intended to both improve safety and slow down traffic. It also created a yield street condition where vehicles would be required to slow down because other vehicles were kind of visually coming in the other direction. So in terms of public engagement, we took several steps to ensure residents were informed and had opportunities to provide feedback. Flyers were distributed. We went to the NPA. We went to all the NPAs in September. We discussed this back in June. And so we just also had signs put up with a QR code linked to a project survey. And so feedback was mixed. So on the positive side, many residents and users of Stanbury Road felt that the pedestrian zone made walking and biking safer. However, nearly half of residents felt the zone made the street less safe, primarily due to the road narrowing, which is a little ironic, and I'll explain here in a minute. We created more challenges for vehicles trying to pass one another. So as we kind of discussed earlier, this yield street concept, which was central to the design of the pedestrian zone, was intended to lower vehicle speeds, and it did, and increase safety for all users. So interestingly, while many complaints centered on the inconvenience caused by slower traffic, these responses highlight the effectiveness of the design. So um, people, as you mentioned earlier, they may say that it's less safe, but it's more like, I can't go faster and I'm mad about that. So it's kind of important to note these yield conditions already exist on all sorts of streets, and they do reduce speed. So the 85th percentile speed on Stanbury, I think, dropped from like 27 to like 23. And that's a pretty significant decrease. And it indicates that the pedestrian zone helped reduce speeds. This was not a vertical change, this is a horizontal change, that visual narrowing, and that this is cheap. This is a really cheap thing to do. We're talking about cones and some signs. So looking ahead, I think we're going to continue to engage the community through the New North End Sidewalk Scoping Study. And I think we may end up looking at a couple of other streets in the New North End, do the same thing. Cottage Grove is a possibility. So folks on that street were very interested in doing the same thing, maybe Green Acres, to do the same experience. Stanbury, in my mind, it's kind of a slam dunk as far as where we should put a sidewalk. But we haven't rolled all of that out yet. But anyway, so that's enough about that. And if you have feedback and want to ask questions, let's do that.
All right, does anyone have any questions about this particular project? Commissioner Montano?
Any chance of Stanbury Road actually getting that permanent sidewalk, given the current funding situation? Like, roughly how many years out does that become a possibility again for a city? Broadly.
That's a
I'm
good
not-
question.
Not pointed to anyone in particular, but I'm just thinking out loud with that one.
It's a good question. Overall, we need to finalize the sidewalk scoping study. We would need to apply for some grant dollars to achieve some sidewalks. There's a lot of issues that need to be worked out. Putting in sidewalks isn't what it used to be. I mean, if you wanted to put a sidewalk on a street, Public Works didn't used to ask. They would just come through the street and just, there comes the sidewalk, and that's the way it is now. We have public engagements, we have right-of-way phase, to make sure that we're, respecting people's properties. And I would imagine we'd be at least 3 years out from that kind of a thing. But these pedestrian zones with the cones and parking removals, narrowing the roadway, that's a very inexpensive thing that we can continue looking at doing. I think this project needs a little bit of marination time for the neighborhood before we come back and do it again.
The state still does have grant programs. We will see what the federal government does with the next transportation bill, but for now, the programs are in place in the timeline of 3 to 5 years. Once a grant is awarded, is a reasonable timeline.
Thank you.
Any other comments? Let's move on to agenda item 8. Go ahead, Phil.
Hey, yes. Okay. Taking up all the time tonight. So just an overview of kind of some proposals, proposed changes to our traffic regulation amendment approval process. We met with Assistant City Attorney Eric Ramakrishnan. He has some concerns about some of the ways that we approve traffic regulations. So basically, the primary goal of these changes is to streamline the process, making it more efficient and responsive, especially when addressing critical issues related to safety and accessibility. As it stands, the current process for amending traffic regulations can be a little slow and complex, which is, as I explained to newer folks that come onto our team, it's a good thing. We want to have good checks and balances. There are multiple layers of review and approval, and this ensures thoroughness, but it also delays timely action. Delays can create a situation where an issue like a need to respond to accessibility issues or parking in a like a school zone adjustments, they go unresolved for longer than they should. So I think that's kind of the idea, and you can kind of see the approval process that I've laid out. So while we're not asking for formal approval today, we want to kind of share the proposed changes with you, gather some feedback, and see what you think, if the process works for the commission. And then by making the process more nimble and responsive, we can not only address critical safety concerns more efficiently, but also better protect the city from liability risks associated with delays in addressing accessibility and safety issues. So I guess I'll just turn it over to you guys. Questions?
Maybe Philip, just to bring this to a point, most regulatory changes, traffic and parking would still come to the full commission. What we've tried to
Absolutely.
do here is just list key, relatively non-controversial, high safety oriented items that if staff were able to do it and not have to wait to a commission meeting, we could act more promptly. Happy to look at what's on this list, modify that if you feel like something shouldn't be here, but trying to be responsive.
Great, thank you. Let's see, commissioner comments. Let's start over with Commissioner Matenu.
I mean, the standards seem fair. Clearly, there are some of these that do arrive on the consent agenda once in a while, but they tend to be as non-controversial as it could get, right? Removing a parking space for the sake of safety almost goes without saying. And in general, I support this becoming the new norm.
Commissioner Barr?
I have no other comments other than I support this. I feel that it's something that makes sense to get things done a little bit faster than waiting 30 days or when we have a month off or something, waiting 60 days possibly. And we can always see how it goes and make changes later on.
Yeah, realistically, the timeline for a new regulation is 2 months. That's usually how it goes. Just the whole process from soup to nuts.
Commissioner Davis?
I guess I don't know how this is done in general, like how now I guess it would be done, but the school crossing guard aspect, is that determined now by the Commission on Public Works?
Yes.
It is the locations where we have crossing guards are listed in Appendix C, and changing the locations is the prerogative of the commission to change Appendix C, the ordinance language.
Okay, interesting. Well, yeah, I definitely think that is reasonable to be done by staff without needing approval, and yeah, I'm in agreement with this change.
Commissioner Sears?
Yeah, it makes sense to me. The crossing guards were a surprise to me too. I guess do we just never have enough of them, so it never comes before the commission?
That's definitely a problem right now. And we definitely, I think I don't know whether, I think we're at like 50% capacity right now.
We could talk about that at another meeting, maybe some other ideas there around crossing guards or alternatives to crossing guards, but that's a separate issue.
Commissioner Neal-Levanco?
Yeah, I support this as well, and feel like, you know, if there are any issues that the public have with any of these processes, we'll hear about it. And then that's an opportunity for us to, as a commission, and to work with staff to figure out what we need to tweak. But this looks great. Thanks.
Yeah, and to be clear, you know, if something elevates because it becomes a political thing, then we would definitely involve the commission. We would also follow the same public process that we follow now. We would engage with the public the same way that we do now, just so that they're even aware. It wouldn't just be like, oh, you want a space here, remove, boom, done. You know, that's not what would be happening.
Great. Vice Chair Fox?
Okay, I have one question. On the no right turn on red, when it says implementing or modifying, does that mean you can take away a right on red restriction? Like if that already exists, that means you can take it away?
I mean, technically, yeah.
Okay, but-
If we did a traffic study on an intersection and we found that it was unnecessary to have, because intersections change.
I'm not advocating for removing any
No,
any
no,
of that. I'm
neither am
saying I think we should move towards more no right turn on red in more parts of the city, and maybe we would just say that this should be implementing and no modifying. That's all. But yeah, I just wanted clarification on that. And yeah, I agree. I think this is fine. I'm supportive of it, and that's all.
Great. I too am supportive of this. I think, and I'm sure there's more technical language that will go into the sort of ordinance. I think just some sort of requirement that at least when staff, whoever it may be, is approving this, that there's sort of a required notification to the commission for that, I think would be helpful, just to make sure we're aware, so we can anticipate if there are sort of some public
Could be
concerns.
commissioner or the director's report, like here are the city engineer amendments that
Approved,
happened
yeah.
this month or whatever.
Right.
Just like a bullet point list. I think that would be, that's a good idea.
So.
That's a good suggestion, and we'll be back with a formal recommendation at a subsequent meeting.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
Did you have another comment?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Are we through with everybody though?
Yeah.
Oh, gotcha. What exactly will the approval be? So what exact change will make these kinds of decisions possible?
Yes, it will be Appendix C language that will specify it's the city engineer's ability to make these decisions. And we'll work with the attorney to formalize a motion that you'll approve to that effect.
Right. And this is something that goes on without city council approval, right? Or okay, so this is
Just
how
you.
how it's been the commission here.
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
The council's delegated to you, and you would basically be delegating to the city
Delegate.
engineer.
I
with
think I
the ability
understand.
to take it back however you'd like.
All right, thank you.
Rob, any public comment on this?
Not at this time.
Excellent. Let's move to the director's report. Thank you, Philip.
See you, friends. Thank you.
All right. Thank you for the opportunity. I will just say that this has been a busy month, and so thanks for your understanding that I did not have a written director's report this month. We'll get back to that next month. We are in the midst of FY26 budgeting, which is a challenge. As you know, the city's fiscal challenges on the general fund side are continuing to be tight. One thing on the Great Streets Main Street project, as you know, we are making progress with the ravine sewer bypass construction. We're about 3/4 the way through of finishing that element of the project. Overall, Great Streets Main Street is a 3-year project. This is the first holiday season we're heading into. The way the contract was let was such that we did not put any restrictions on their work and time of year. Both bidders that bid on this project did recommend winter work, and we are now at the first holiday season. There are stakeholders in the downtown who, after significant challenges downtown that are beyond DPW's purview, have stressed the business community, and that there's increased concern about how the cumulative impacts of that plus our construction could bring additional burden during the holiday season. So I have jumped into this issue fully. I have met with the contractor and the owner of the company multiple times. I'm planning to meet with them again tomorrow. We do already have a robust, I believe robust, array of promotions. You all have passed the 99-cent holiday promotion in the downtown meters. We are subsidizing to the tune of $12,000 a month, the 85 spaces in the Courthouse Plaza parking garage. Business and Workforce Development did secure a grant to do additional promotion for downtown businesses. We are really trying to go over and above for our project to mitigate impacts, and yet I understand overall sensitivity. So I hope by the end of this week that I will have an update on what we can do further for the holiday season. And if there's any questions or concerns about that, feel free to let me know. I will say it was great to have Division Director Megan Moyer here earlier tonight and talking about the rate impacts of our water and wastewater reinvestments. We are going to a number of NPAs this month. There are plant tours. Please refer your friends to our great website that is having more and more resources added to it every day. We find the more we can embark on a dialogue with people, the more productive discussions we can have as a community around the future water quality investments that we need to make, and be able to explain really that we are being thoughtful in phasing this. And yes, it's a huge project, but it is one I believe is necessary for our commitment to future growth through lake protection and through regulatory compliance. With that, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Any commissioners have questions on items on the director's report? Vice Chair Fox.
I have a quick question about the Main Street project. So I understand that the businesses are concerned about the Main Street and Winooski Ave intersection closing. I guess this is like a quick question. Will people still be able to drive into the Courthouse Plaza garage with that intersection closed? 'Cause
They would not be able to do it from that intersection, though. They would need to access it from King Street to get there.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
That's kind of a bummer. Just a little, anyway. I don't know, beyond that, I feel like you're gonna have to detour traffic with that intersection closed, and I feel like it almost could benefit the businesses, because if you have to detour them on like Union Street, and then they have to go down, College Street or like
Yes.
Pearl Street, then they're like hitting Church Street directly, like, I don't know, is there, like, I've seen the businesses are open signs, and are there any other, like, promotional things we can do with the businesses at where those intersections are closed, right? Can they have their own, like, sandwich boards or something like that? That is just a little more, like,
Yeah.
appealing for the holidays.
Yeah.
Because the traffic is gonna be directed towards them when it's detoured. Anyway, just a thought.
Yeah, there have been a series of mitigation steps. BWD did take a lead on a lot of the businesses are open signage. We have gotten some flexible options for businesses to do some of their own promotion with sandwich boards and with sidewalk chalk
Nice.
to help draw people into their businesses. We haven't had people widely taking advantage of that. It's understandable, there's a lot on their plates as well. We are deploying more signage for our parking resources for people that are coming into the downtown. We've been working with our city attorney on regulatory compliance with the VMSs, the digital message boards that go around, just to make sure that we deploy those in a thoughtful but also legal way. And we're working with BWD on digital outreach to draw people hopefully to the downtown, regardless of the intersection closure, but to promote parking resources, and for people who hopefully are walking and biking, just the simple fact that Burlington downtown in the holiday season's a great place to be. So we're working with them on that. So there's a few things in place that we're hoping to really promote and push.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. I think, I think certainly the department has definitely done their part and more, and I think really, asking, I know that the business community is certainly stretched as well, but also asking them to do their part. And I know some of the privately owned parking, I noticed some of the privately owned parking garages have some fun red lights on their signs, leading people into their garages. I don't know if that's something that we're allowed to do, but that certainly caught my attention, traveling around the city. Just
One comment, so it is nice to have part of Main Street with no cars. I know that's terrible thing to say, but it really is, like walking in front of the Flynn. We went to a Flynn show, we're able to just bike there, park our bikes out front. There are benefits, and, we are contributing to our local economy that way. The one thing at the top of, or the end of Church Street on Main Street, there's that chain link fence that says businesses are open. It's a little janky, so I don't know, and I don't know, does it have to be like that enormous chain link fence? It doesn't say ho, 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 or welcome. I mean, even though there's a sign there that says businesses are open, is there, and I don't know, is it the, DPW, is it the city, is it SD Ireland, is there a way to kind of zhuzh it up a little bit? That just makes it a little bit more inviting, because then it then forces you, like as you turn left to go up Main Street, kind of towards like Cafe Hot, you're kind of forced into a little bit of a gauntlet, if you know what I mean. That's probably less appealing for some folks. But it is nice. I've found it. I've biked and I've walked and I've even driven downtown. I've found some really good on-street parking. So it is accessible. Things are open. But maybe if you're not from Burlington, then trying to figure out how to navigate all that might be that kind of little bit of daunting piece.
Yeah, we have tried to work on different sign options, and that's with BWD, who took the lead on the sign you're referring to, businesses are open, on the chain link fence. That's what we were able to come up with kind of quickly and within budget for now. We are going to be using Park Mobile, I forgot to mention before, to promote some additional kind of out-of-towner perspective on how to get around and navigate. We'll be a little limited on text that we can use for their platform, since they need to also, they're using it to drive revenue and they don't want to make it a simply city-specific kind of platform, but we are open to any other ideas if folks want to share those. And we're working with BWD, who's lead on kind of the marketing and promotion of downtown right now, to implement whatever creative ideas that we can do within, I think, our budget.
Okay, thanks.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you.
Moving on to commissioner items. Anyone would like to start?
I can start, and I have some follow-up on what we just discussed as well. First, before I forget, the efficiencies on that last agenda item before the director's report about traffic things that don't need direct commissioner approval, I think, are there other things that maybe come to mind that would make sense to do? Is that something being looked at? I think that might be beneficial. Certain things just seem way better in the hands of city engineers than they do us 60 days later, from my perspective. Regarding the Main Street situation, I think there are a lot of interesting confluences happening. So one thing is, if we are decreasing or like subsidizing the parking rate when parking and movement in downtown is at a premium, then people are more likely to stay in those parking spaces longer, making it more frustrating for the people that are already having a harder time moving downtown. And so I see those as not really complementing one another, and I think there are lots of reasons why businesses and other interested parties would be taking everything that's happening all at the same time, and if the Department of Public Works is the entity that's most likely to do things that can help them, they'll say, oh, well, it must be all our fault, because it's either the easiest thing to change or the most likely thing to get buy-in from. So I think that is quite complicated. I don't really have any solutions on that, but I find it frustrating because it's something that needs to happen, and I don't necessarily know that. I'd be curious to have some hard data on the impact on businesses. Not necessarily expecting you all to provide that. Presumably the businesses could provide that and see from their perspective what's going on. But I find it somewhat hard to believe that it's this huge negative impact, just from my intuition. Um, anyone else have anything to say on that? I was going to jump to a completely different topic, so I don't want to. Okay. So with the water pump station relocation, Sharon's comment about kind of the, I guess, the time impact of rate increases. I kind of related to that. I was curious is there any future item within that kind of 50-year time horizon that is precluded by not keeping the east pump station? I can't necessarily think of anything, but is there some circumstance where like it might prevent development somewhere, or it might have additional difficulties in terms of expansion later on because of limitations to kind of the volume at the main station?
I think my response would be that it's the opposite. Each plant has its own limit for permit limit for capacity and for phosphorus. If we combine the plants, we have more flexibility. We don't have to balance development and where it is, that we have more ability to accept development in a wider area. And if we build a pump station with its own dedicated flow straight to main plant, it won't overly burden existing pipes in the network. So I really, it was one of those ideas from staff, and my understanding was discussed 30 years ago in the last round of plant overhauls that wasn't advanced. But for a community our size, to have 3 plants is highly unusual.
Okay, yeah, that totally makes sense. Yeah, that's good to hear.
One other benefit is just if you have a smaller plant and some user dumps in some inappropriate material into the flow, it's a larger percentage of the overall flow, which has the ability to really disrupt the biological processes of the plant. Where if you have a larger plant, one user is a smaller percentage of the overall flow.
Gotcha. Yeah, the tolerances.
Yeah.
That makes sense. Yeah, is there any staffing implication?
Certainly staffing implications in terms of more staff being at main plant, which is a positive approach. So yes, we do have to staff 3 different locations. I doubt through this consolidation that there would need to be a reduction in force. Given the complexities of main plant and the deferred work we have, I think we would get a higher level of service in fewer locations.
Okay, awesome. Regarding kind of the broader cost increases, or rate increases, I guess, something that in my utility work comes up somewhat often is efficiency can only take you so far because you're reducing the number of units used, which means you actually need to increase the price on those units. So I bring that up because it is in the world, like say 70 years ago or something, where no one really cared about conserving resources, or very few people did, and efficiency was much less of a concern, then you could just anticipate that there would probably be increasing usage on all these utilities, even at the individual level, like the intensivity. So like each individual household would probably use more water resources over time, like they're washing cars, they're watering plants, whatever. And you didn't need like as much of the extensive, meaning additional households being added or additional people being added on that margin. And I think we're now in a time period where that's compressed for like all the different utility types, because conservation and efficiency is becoming more important, both for cost reasons and resource reasons, and also just being reasonable and sustainable. And so to some degree, I think there's a bit of a regime change in what people should expect from utilities and their price increases. And I think it's okay to pay a good amount for a good thing, and and it's tricky to, you can cut costs now and pay for them a lot later, and that's what we're already doing, and I fear that kind of taking something like water, which is both so fundamental and relatively cheap, has the threat of endangering future either people's health in the extreme case, or like development and other things. So I think maybe just the perspective on rates is complicated by like all the other price increases people are going through and affordability, but some things really just are worth having. And for instance, I don't think we'd be having a similar conversation if it was like, what if there wouldn't be a road anymore that connects two cities? The assumption is just, oh, well, we have to have that regardless of the cost. And I think things like utilities get kind of a little bit invisible and harder for people to accept. Sorry to go so long on that. Last thing that I have is the Champlain Parkway. Are there any speed limit signs on it?
We're adding them.
Okay. It's supposed to be 25 miles an hour, right? Okay. I had someone, I was going like 27 or something, and they were going like 37, and they passed me angrily, and I was like, I don't think this is how this is supposed to go.
There were no speed limit signs in the initial package, because it's the final package as you're ramping down from the interstate to go from 55 down to 25. But given that that section's not open and people are using this middle section, I believe we need to get 25-mile-an-hour signs up, because I'm noticing the same thing. So we're making that happen.
Okay. And I don't think it's a huge deal, but it would be nice to just know for sure what the speed limit is, so then people know if they're speeding anyway, that's on them. There is no uncertainty.
I have noticed the same behavior.
Okay. Well, thanks for indulging me. Sorry I took so long there.
Can I add something to that, though? There are signs as you enter the city that says speed limit is 25 unless otherwise posted.
Yes.
So if it's not posted, it should be 25. But I get passed all the time if I'm going, and I love having the line behind me, and I know all these people love to watch this, but I have a line behind me all the time, because I might get up to 27. And my wife asks what are you thinking about? I said, I'm thinking about continuing the speed limits, what I'm thinking about. So, but yeah, speed limit signs are fun, but then you get sign pollution too, so. Yeah.
I do always wonder about how much space between signs does it now become the default, the 25? But yeah,
And most new cars, and mine, I'm not new enough at yet, I guess, but they actually have the speed limit on the speedometer. So when you're going a certain speed, it'll show you what you should be going, and then it sometimes flashes.
Which
But
some of
they
those
don't pay attention to that either. So.
Well, some of those use GPS systems that may or may not update, so people can wind up going, like we just decreased speed limits to 20, it might still say 25, and then, yeah, so, but yeah, I agree. People that are speeding generally are aware that they're speeding. That's not
How dare
the
we
issue.
tell them they can't?
Thanks, Jerry. Commissioner Sears, any commissioner comments?
Let's see. So I think I missed the last meeting. I was sick, but I had somebody approach me earlier in the fall about the Roosevelt Park redesign, and I guess an idea of extending Little Rosie, the playground, to connect to Roosevelt. And they, I don't know, seemed to think it needed to come before this commission, or it hadn't, or I guess there was just some question around process. I know Parks and Rec is leading that process, but it seemed to make a lot of sense to me. There's no driveways, but just to connect Little Rosie to Roosevelt Park. Someone approached me and I had I was kind of like, oh, it hasn't come. I don't think it's come before this commission unless I missed it.
Not.
But yeah, anyways, I just wanted to put that comment out there. I thought it was a great idea.
It's an active discussion between Parks and
Oh, great.
DPW staff.
Okay.
Yeah, as to whether or not to Willow.
Is it Willow? I think it's
Street.
Willow. It's
Yeah,
like a
that-
section of Willow.
Yeah, could could we abandon a section of Willow Street, turn it into grass, and what are the street maintenance and circulation implications of that?
So I'm just passing
Yeah.
along some support
Okay.
for that.
Yep.
Commissioner O'Neill.
All right, just a couple quick things. How are we on staffing for winter? Snow will fly, we hope. Maybe ice, but we hope snow.
Yes, we are in decent shape. I am pleased to report that we are fairly full-staffed. We have like one person out on medical leave, and maybe one position that's going to soon retire, but otherwise, we are in good shape with street maintenance.
That's good.
And I will just continue the good news that Laura and her team have done a remarkable job. After a year or so of being understaffed, they are now fully staffed. So tech services, we had Christina, who was here last month, has been hired. We have another engineer, Jack, and our finance person's been hired. So Laura's team is back up to full strength.
That's great. That's good news.
Hallelujah.
For crossing guards, it's not a crossing guard thing, it's a thought, okay? I've seen these bike buses, where and we did this when my kids were little, and you just like, a parent or so rides a bike, and then you just like haul kids. I've convinced someone who's also a city employee in Parks and Rec to be my wingman and be the music. I would totally volunteer to lead like a bike bus, and we could do it one day a week at different schools. I'm just saying, okay? That came to me, I needed to get it out.
Okay.
And then finally, so with this proposed, the delegation of authority, the changing of the traffic regulations, so maybe that no right turn on red on what intersection, anybody? Is it
Union Street and Main Street.
Yeah.
Could that happen?
You know, I had followed up after our last meeting. I thought that was going to be implemented. Are you telling me it's not implemented yet? Which is a concern to me. So
As I was on my bike
Yeah.
earlier this week, I was
Yeah.
like, oh my God. No, it's not yet.
It's not. Okay. All right. Well, thank you for letting me know. And I have another follow-up to do.
Thank you.
I've written it down.
That's all, thanks.
Yeah.
Commissioner Matano?
No comments at this time. Thank you.
Commissioner Barr?
Okay, I've already talked about Grove Street and trying to slow traffic there, and there was a fatal accident just before Bayberry where a truck flipped over, and so I think they took down the speedometer speed reader sign to try and figure out some of the speeds that might be there and try to determine the time. So police are working on that, but I do like some of the things that have been implemented, and I'm very appreciative of them. But one thing that I noticed at the Chase Street and Colchester Avenue intersection, I understand that it was probably too wide when it was first put in for the plow trucks to be able to get by. It was just paint on the ground, the bollards, which by the way, I still have one in my garage, I should bring that to you. Now that it's been reduced, I think traffic is back up to the same speed that it was before, even with the parking chicanes. Because there's not as much traffic, when the parking chicanes were put in, there was construction on Barrett Street, so there was a lot more traffic on Chase Street, and it worked well. Because when you've got cars going both ways, they stay in their lane, they go slow, and because there's more to negotiate. Now that there's not as much traffic, the ones that do go down, I will just say, and I don't have a radar gun, but they are going in excess of 33 miles an hour, sometimes 40 miles an hour. So if there could be, I think he called it the horizontal versus the vertical, if we could look at maybe a flower pot up at the top just to cause it a little determination. And the other thing too, and I might have put it in a C-click fix, but if there could be a center line put on Chase Street, because especially if there's not a lot of traffic, cars just take the middle. And if you're coming up the street, they don't care. They're just going to keep, so It does slow traffic down because then you have to stop to have the car move, but there's really not always a rhyme or reason.
Okay.
And the last thing too is when we first did the parking chicanes, I created this little sign, very nicely says, you're not supposed to be parking on this side, you should be parking right across there. I just don't want you to get towed. And then I'd put it on their windshield. But now I almost like the cars parking there because then it really slows down the traffic. So, but yeah, I'm, as always, I'm appreciative of all that Public Works does and all that you've accomplished in the city with limited refund, limited budget and staffing. But I think Chase Street does need some attention.
Okay.
So, thanks.
Vice Chair Fox?
Yeah, I'm gonna ask for an update on a couple of things. Where did the chips fall on North Ave and Plattsburgh bike lane?
Right, yeah, we asked the community to give us more time to collect data through the fall and to look at the data over the winter and make a decision for next year what to do. The plan is to not have any barriers out there over the winter and to give us time to have a discussion internally with the data and then externally with the community and then implement in the spring.
Okay. Wasn't part of the point of it to implement the change while it was being paved? I guess it's just paint, so it's not like a huge
Correct.
expense.
Right.
But it's not that big of an efficiency that it doesn't matter that much.
The bike lane would be buffered basically the width of a travel lane, so everything could be painted except for the bike lane, and it's not like anything else will need to be redone. We will just have to add additional painting in the spring.
Okay. Cool. The other thing I wanted to check on was the North Street chicane in front of Sustainability Academy. I saw like the first weekend that was up, people did not pay attention to it, and I was like, oh no, but then the parking area got a little like striped to
Yeah.
designate it, so it looked good and it looked like it was working, but I don't know.
I haven't gotten a recent update on that. I would be interested to hear your feedback, and I do need to get an update from staff on that.
Okay.
I've been by it multiple times.
I can weigh in on that.
Okay,
I
also
think it's working very effectively.
Okay, that's great.
Yeah, it certainly
Yeah.
slowed down, and, as a resident of Rose Street, coming out of that street has made it a little bit more difficult, but I think that's sort of the point, and it's
Okay.
made folks coming out of Rose Street onto North in either direction sort of slow down when
Okay.
coming around the corner there.
Cool.
But yes, the paint in the second round certainly helped. It
Yeah.
certainly was a little chaotic the
Yeah.
first.
Yeah. Yeah, okay.
Okay, great. And this is not really a question, but just something I noticed that I want to give kudos on. I noticed that the left turn lane on George Street was removed and replaced with just like a planter. I love that. The crosswalk is shorter. Let's do more of that. Yeah, I guess I was just like, I was running one day and I was like, the lane's gone. That's a nice planter.
The capacity was not needed to have two different lanes
Yeah.
at George Street, and we're in discussions with adjacent employees and employers, and they were concerned about sight lines, and we were able to preserve sight lines if we moved all the traffic into the right-hand lane.
Yep.
So it was safer to pull out.
Yeah, no, I love it. That's great. I would love to see more of those kind of like quick implementable things that make those little differences because they add up. So yeah, that's all.
Excellent.
Great.
I don't have any commissioner comments. I think everything else was covered pretty well.
Okay.
Looking for a motion to adjourn. Second?
I'll second the motion.
Excellent. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye for myself. Excellent. Meeting adjourned.
That's it.
Nailed it.
So